Hi, everyone. Thanks for being on time, but as you know, people are often running a couple minutes late, so we'll start in just about 2 minutes here. Thanks so much. All right, it's webinar time. Thanks, everybody, for hanging on there just a minute to let the rest of the folks get in here. Today, we're going to be talking about Beyond the Patch, Revolutionary Vulnerability Management with Bacon Unlimited. And we got to show off all this great feature set at RSA last month. That was a great conference. We met over 1,000 people, had a huge amount of interest. It was a really, really great experience. And we're just working every day to get this feature out the door, hopefully by the end of the month here. And it's really coming along quickly, and we're learning a lot about all the cool things we want to keep adding to it. So with that, let's get kind of into it here. We're going to talk about today's agenda, which is we'll do introductions here in a minute, and then we'll do a high-level overview, these new feature enhancements, maybe talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about next month and what's coming, because we got some really neat additional stuff that we're working on, and then we'll close it up. So we'll try to be efficient today. Appreciate all of you making it. With that, let's do some introductions, Dave. My name is John Marcato. I am the CTO and co-founder at Bacon Unlimited, and been doing this for a long time. That is working in the IT industry, trying to fix things, make things better. And joining me today is Dave Adekoya, our senior engineer and super duper demo guy, who's going to be helping me out today. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
Indeed. And this has been an interesting year. You and I have pretty much been the team for this whole year, which has been great. I don't know if we'll do that for the rest of the year entirely, but I feel like we've got a pretty good rhythm with this stuff. Let's not forget any of the parts. So let's do some good housekeeping here and make sure everybody knows how to use this fun stuff. We are using the GoToWebinar platform. If you haven't used it before, there is a question section. I highly recommend using it. If there's anything you want to know, we'll answer in line, or I should say online, while you're asking those. Sometimes we incorporate it into the conversation as well if it's particularly timely. And also, we're going to be running some polls here in a second. Those will just pop up on your screen. They're very easy to answer, and they're very helpful to us. And then lastly, there's some surveys at the very end of the webinar that we greatly appreciate you filling out. That way we can do a better job and can communicate with you in a successful way. So we will reach out to folks after the webinar and make sure that you've got everything that you need. So thanks for that. And why don't we move on from there, Dave, and just talk about some of the other resources we have. We do have a YouTube channel where we have our Bacon Bits videos. They're nice and short. They're great for training or just learning about particular features and best practices and ways to do things. So it's 100 and some odd videos up there, and we post new ones all the time. All right, so moving on from there, I think we're probably pretty close to doing some polls here. Lane, if you'd be so kind to launch our first poll. She's worked for us in the background to make all this stuff happen. All right, what are your biggest pain points with your current vulnerability remediation tools? It's kind of a mouthful, but I think we all need to remediate vulnerabilities, or most people who are on this webinar probably do. And let us know. You can choose any or all of those listed there. And polls are tabulating and tabulating. And it's a pretty good spread. It does say incomplete solution seems to be the largest along with complexity. And we'll see how it turns out in the end, though. It's like a little horse race going on my view. Just a second here, it'll time out once everybody's voted. And it's done. And there you go. So
there you go.
46% incomplete. But it seems like all of these issues, time-consuming and missing cross-platform fixes, are all concerns for people. And those are all things that we address in Bacon. So we'll be talking about those today. And we're going to just do one more quick poll before we jump into it. So Lane, if you would be so kind as to launch that one, we'll finish it up. This is the easier one. We just always like to get a spread for what people have to support. Are they in monolithic environments, or do they have good splits of different things? There's some way we could easily ask percentages of those too, but I'll have to look at what the poll options are in GoToMeeting. But what operating system do you currently support? macOS, iOS, Windows, Linux, and Windows pretty much always is the only one that always gets 100%. But it's impressive how high we get on the others. 50, 54.
I think the Linux side, look at that. Yeah.
It's pretty high. So yeah, Windows is the banger, and then everything else gets partial share, which is kind of commonly what we see month to month. So definitely appreciate y'all filling that out. And why don't we move on? I'll do a quick overview, Dave, as we always do, about Bacon and kind of why Bacon exists and why you should use it, and kind of what it consists of, and then we'll have you jump in and actually show off the goods. So I'm going to try to do this a little rapidly today, so that people don't have to waste too much time on slides. But Bacon is a very modern endpoint manager compared to the rest of the marketplace, and we focus on visibility, control, and automation. The idea there is that what you can see, you can control, and what you can control, you can automate. So it's really important to keep that order. And what we really want to make sure we do is that we visualize everything that's important, and then we give as much control as you can to the things that need to be manipulated and managed. And then we can do automation in ways that are really, really helpful to people, to eliminate wasted work, and to also, take out the negative side of the human equation, which is to remove error or inconsistency. So those are kind of the whys. And then Dave, you wouldn't mind flipping the slide. We'll just finish off here. Kind of what is it, right? So if you haven't seen it before, Bacon is a cross-platform security-focused endpoint management system, and that means it manages, Mac, Windows, 8 flavors of Linux, iOS, and the concept that we're trying to really go for is the modern IT world is pretty challenged because there's a huge amount of work on patching and vulnerability management that's really hampering people getting a lot of other things done. And these things should be relatively easy to manage, and they generally aren't. And sometimes that's the tools people have, and sometimes it's the lack of tools. And sometimes it's just it's just so overwhelming and time consuming. I talked to a huge amount of my colleagues in the past couple of weeks. I was doing a post RSA sort of follow up, just trying to learn about what their thoughts are. And a lot of them from my early days in IT have moved into the dedicated security fields. They're VPs of IT and CISOs and things like that. And the thing that they're finding a lot is for every little vulnerability and thing, they've got to do this huge sort of cataloging exercise. And then they've got the tools they have are great at finding things, but they don't actually do anything. So Bacon really helps fill that gap where historically we haven't really shown vulnerabilities, but we could do all the fixes for them, but you had to do all sort of the mapping and matching. And now Bacon is able to show you the vulnerabilities and give you a direct path to solving those for endpoints so that you can really do that quickly. And then you can report on it in a way that shows how successful you've been in doing exactly that task. So that's kind of where we've gone with Bacon. But in order to get there, we had to do what all these features include. And that means patching operating systems, doing third-party patching, and particularly proactive third-party patching. And then the biggest one, which we really just kick butt in this area, is controlling the configurations of systems. So on all of the systems that we mentioned, you can control every available setting on the system. Anything you could think you could do from a CLI or from group policy or the registry or firewall rules or configuration files on Linux and Mac, all of these things can be controlled and visualized on Bacon. So you actually know that you've successfully done them or not successfully done them. One of the things I've always not liked about group policy in Windows, or I should say an Active Directory group policy, is that one, it only works for Windows systems, and two, it does a lot of things, but doesn't do a great job of telling you that it's done those things or that those things have been undone. And when you're talking about security, there is a value to absolutes, like really knowing that all 80 of the machines you were intending to get into a particular state actually got into that state and remain in that state. So that's what Bacon was very, very focused on from the very beginning. And now, while we've had a lot of people do CIS and NIST controls with it and things like that, now we're start seeing that the bulk work of patching and upgrading third-party software and setting these configurations is really about the upfront of which things are important, which things do I need to do first. So Dave's going to show a lot about that concept and really give a sense for the tool and how we can do individual things with our full set of built-in remoting tools, as well as do more macro things like patching 1,000 machines or 5,000 machines at once, or rolling out software to that many machines, or whatever. So with that, Dave, I think that pretty much sums up the summary. And if you're ready to jump into it, I'll hand you the reins.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, let's switch over to our beta labs. I'm going to kind of change how we usually do our walkthrough. We're going to start with the new feature, which is our vulnerability detection and remediation side. And then we'll go through the standard overview of like what Bacon is, how to, as John said, do things to individual machines or to groups of machines. And we'll go from there. So let's start off by moving over to our beta server. So as we've been saying, we now have a feature built into Bacon that allows you to detect and remedy those vulnerabilities. So there's kind of two methods to do it. Initially, we have our own detection mechanism, and so it's going to be able to scan your devices. That could be macOS, Windows, Linux, right? We are cross-platform for this one. And it's going to find all the matching CVEs. These can be things like it's a bad configuration that needs change, maybe disabling services, things like that. It can be applications that are out of date. Browsers update a lot, so they're usually on this list every so often, as well as things like OS patches, contain security updates. We can handle all of those, just natively built into Bacon. Additionally, we also have a tie-in with Tenable. So if you already have that product, you're able to use both Tenable SC, I believe is the cloud version, or sorry, Tenable SC is the on-prem version, then Tenable VM, is it vulnerability management, John, I believe, is the cloud side.
You've got it.
And
It
you're
used to
able
be Tenable IO, and they changed the name, so they do a great job of keeping us a little bit confused. But
yeah. Yeah, the branding always gets me every time. So with that, you're able to use their engine to load in what we call plugins, which are those same kind of CVE records that'll show you that you have issues. And so you can use a combination of the two or just one or the other. And then, of course, as we keep saying, we offer remediations. When we were over at RSA, one thing I did notice was that the fixing of the problem was the novel concept. People's eyes would glaze over as I say, yeah, we can detect stuff. And they go, yeah. And I say we can fix it. And they're like, wait, run that back again. One more time. So let's show you how that works. I'm going to start with the CVE side. So here you can see different CVEs that were detected on our machines. This can be things like, again, software is in here. Any kind of Windows updates or any OS updates are going to be part of this list. How this works is we can click on a CVE, and it's going to bring us to a breakdown of which endpoints are actually vulnerable to the problem. In this case, one of our Mac endpoints. and then what we can actually do about it. So when I click view link here, it's going to bring us to NIST. This is the underlying database we're using to match up those problems. So here I can see what it is. And of course, any additional documentation on how to fix it and all kind of good stuff will be listed here. Now, that's all well and good, but you can see how long the list is, and that's kind of where the problem occurs. Is there's a lot of extra work you're going to do just figuring out what it is, can we fix it, has it been used in the wild, that kind of thing. And that's really our goal behind the remediation side. Now, kind of moving forward, let's look at the compliance side. So here, we're going to get a top-down view of what's actually going on in the environment. Here are those same CVEs, but now it's broken out into how many of your machines have the problem and how many have actually been resolved. So you can see lots of ones here. Of course, we have different filters for like severity or how many endpoints, all that kind of good stuff. Over on the endpoint side, we're flipping it upside down. Now we're looking at the actual devices that may be vulnerable. Maybe you've got some critical edge servers, any kind of like web services, things that are going to be more vulnerable than, say, the backup server in the closet. Those might be the ones you prioritize so we can actually see how vulnerable or how much to work or how much work we have to do, let's say it that way, to kind of get these all patched up and secure. The next up, we have history. This is going to give you an idea of when we found the problem and how long it took to fix the problem. So now we're kind of keeping tabs, just like we do with patching, same kind of concept. We're keeping tabs on the activity in the system so that you can do reporting on how effectively you are keeping up with the ever growing list of CVEs. Now, on the Tenable side, it's going to be very similar. I'm going to go over here. Again, we're going to see plugin ID instead of CVE. But when I click on this, it's going to bring us to a very, very familiar page. The difference here is that we have this link that's now going to Tenable. So they're going to tell us what they think is wrong and how we can, if possible, fix it. So again, similar kind of thing here. I do like the Tenable interface. It's like a little bit more streamlined, so it's easier to see, okay, what do I do about this, right? The other one's not as clear, at least for me. So this really helps us out. Now, again, just like we saw before, we have the same things available. If there's any like CVEs or mapping to it too, we'll be able to detect those and keep those in the table here for like cross-referencing. But typically you're safe to just kind of clear out both lists and you should take care of everything. On the compliance side, it's going to look very similar. Again, same thing, but now we're just looking for plugin versus CVE, but same exact data, what the problem is, either by the issue itself, the endpoints affected, or our reporting side of under history. When it comes to remediations, that's the part everyone's here for, so I'm not going to keep you from it. In this case, there's a couple ways we can solve these problems. We break it down into 4 different methods. Patches is, of course, going to be an OS-centric thing, so maybe we can get out of this issue and solve this CVE by updating the OS. Pretty simple. As you know, Bacon is able to patch, so we've just made it even easier to match these up and get them installed. You could theoretically go through, get all the information, type in all the KBs into an Excel spreadsheet, and then go through and pick those specific updates. We did that before this feature. But now it's as simple as going to Actions and Install. It's that easy. And here it's going to actually push the patch out either to the machines that need it or really any machines that have this patch pending. So as we always do, we only see the machines that need patches in this UI. So just one, we can push it out quite simply and you're done. Over on the configuration side, this is the one I personally like. So on our side, we're hosting a service where we're going to be able to provide these fixes as we go through the CVEs. These are going to be for things that just can't be updated away. So let's say if we wanted to disable SMV1 or SMBV1, excuse me, on like an older file server, we could push this config, or let's say LSA protection. Some of these get really technical too. And there's always little gotchas here and there too, like restricting anonymous SID lookups. I went through this one for the demo itself, in which it's all well and good to push this out unless you're a domain controller. Then there's some extra steps you have to take in there. So on our side, we're able to make this configuration for you and make it as simple on your end as looking at the problem, seeing that 10 endpoints need this fix, and going to actions and apply. Here, if you're familiar with how states work, same concept, but this is going to be like a one-time application of states. That's a really nice option for us as well. And so here we can either select it by group, or alternatively, we have the endpoints that are affected pre-selected here. So in this case, it's probably safe to push this out to every machine since I do have the logic in there to handle domain controllers differently by Microsoft's recommendation. But like I said before, we're just going to apply and then apply again, and it's that easy. On the package side, you'd never believe the interaction. We're going to see this thing, we're going to click actions, and we're going to fix the thing. Again, just like we were doing before, this time by updating software. So here, again, the endpoints I need to update are pre-selected, and I can just go through here and apply. We tried to keep it super simple. It makes it a little bit harder to demo because there's not like a giant process. It really is like a 2-click solution, but that's our goal. And I think it's going to save you a ton of time. The majority of these things that I've seen at least can be easily updated out of, or just, fix your configurations or update the software. But there's a fourth category, and this is more for the manual option that needs some context. So obviously like this requires the human thought versus something I can automate. These can be very small things that are intentional. Let's say I have a file server and I have this vulnerability pop up saying it's possible to access a network share. I hope it is. That's the whole entire point of the server. This is one of those things where I can't automate this. This is something that we want to use your brain, your context, and so you know your environment better than we ever could. And you can go through and figure out, should these shares be open for everybody? Yes or no? Things again, like if we have local users that are not able to change their password, that may be desirable for a service account. So these are the ones that we're able to detect and then recommend fixes for you. So kind of similar to our method before, but now we're just recommending the actual fix that we're getting. In this case, I believe it's from Tenable. It's one of the plugins. So that's kind of the feature we have available for you. I think you can see how impactful this is to just the amount of time it takes to solve this problem. Some companies have entire job roles or departments just dedicated to chasing these CVEs. But I think, in all honesty, regardless of company size, we're all equally vulnerable. So we all want to stay on top of this and make it as painless as possible. So this is a fantastic step in that direction and making staying secure just a little bit easier to kind of encourage people to make some time in their schedule. It's difficult, it really is. But if we can save you some time, we're happy to do so. So that's the overall overview of this feature, John. Anything I missed or anything you want to add before we go to the just main bacon walkthrough?
I can't remember. Did you cover the CISA currently exploited list?
I didn't because I didn't remember. Do you want to cover that, or do you want me to walk
We
through
can
it?
we can do it together. So I think the important thing is if you click on CVEs or actually even on remediations, either or, what
Mhm.
you'll see is that uh, we're getting data from multiple sources. So even if you don't have
Mhm.
Tenable, which is a great source, it's a very good product, sort of the market leader in advanced scanning. There's a couple other little key value points that we're bringing to the table. So one of the columns, which is not currently on the screen, but you can go shuffle over and find it there somewhere, Dave. And you know
I
what?
don't
It's
think it's. Yeah, it might be
maybe yeah,
on
on there because I
this
think
guy here. There it is. C6 slated.
so. Yeah, and the best thing to do is actually use a filter here to look at it.
True.
But so for those who don't
Oops.
know, we're getting data from the National Vulnerabilities Data Base about vulnerabilities, and we're mapping and matching those on your system. That's if you're not using Tenable at all. If you're using Tenable, you still get all that data, but you also get Tenable data. And then we're also including the information from CISA. And so what CISA does, one of the many things they do, is they have a list of currently exploited vulnerabilities. Those are the vulnerabilities that are actually being used in the wild right now to exploit people and attack people. So you can sort of think of it as a real safe way to find out that you have a very high risk, probably the worst term to use because risk is a sort of another analytical point. But I would just say that if I see that CISA marker on any vulnerability, I really want to get those dealt with in my environment as fast as possible. So
Yeah,
um,
does go first.
yeah. So if you have that in there and it can be remediated, you should remediate it as quickly as possible. If it can't be remediated, you should mitigate by taking systems offline, not using certain pieces of software, putting things behind heavier firewall rules, whatever it takes to mitigate them. But it's a really good piece of data to know. So that's one of the main things. And actually, if I can catapult to another point here, Dave, which I think people should
Yeah,
know,
go for it.
doing this kind of mapping for third-party software and operating system versions is really powerful because the large majority, virtually all vulnerabilities on endpoints are fixed with either patches or third-party software upgrades. However, there are somewhere between 7 and 10% that are only fixed with configuration changes, particularly in the early days when the vulnerability may not have a patch yet, but can be changed with, say, a registry setting on Windows. And we
Yeah.
want to make sure that we deal with all of those. However, some tools that do deep scanning, like Tenable, are going to be able to really get you those sort of more specific configuration-oriented ones. But even without that, you're going to be able to get 90 to 93% from Bacon while doing non-invasive scans. So basically collecting inventory variations every 15 or less seconds about the operating system and all of its software inventory. And because you know that data, without having to actually do a deep scan, you're getting much closer to real-time data on that sort of 90% set. So that 90% set of threats you can be dealing with every single day and keeping your systems really cleaned up. And if you also have something like Tenable in your environment, it's going to catch some of those extra things. But oftentimes people are only scanning with things like Tenable or Qualys or Rapid7 like once a week, or sometimes they're more aggressive about it daily because they find that sometimes those scans are so aggressive that they take things offline sometimes. So they go, oh, we're not doing that, during regular business hours and maybe only on the weekends. So that's one of the things is we can give you a lot more visibility without taking the same level of risk, kind of pounding on the systems with scans. So I think those things actually go really well together. And that's a point that was brought up to me by one of these calls that I had, and they were like, I love that you can get this data without me having to do a deep scan. And I was like, yeah, that's actually a really good thing. So I wanted to make sure I brought it up on the webinar, Dave.
Yeah, that's a great point. And think about that. The performance costs can matter a lot, especially if they're either running very tight or, again, it's just like an older machine. That definitely makes sense.
Or if they kick you off of a webinar or a web call, that's really important, right? So those deep
Security
scans,
comes first, but please don't. Yeah.
they can cause some issues. So they're still important to do, but you have to be thoughtful about when, right? And they're sort of point in time, where Bacon is all the time. So it's kind of a good thing.
Bacon is all the time. I like it.
Yeah, there you go. There's a new statement for us. Bacon is all the time.
This is how these taglines come up with. It's just discussion. That's fantastic.
Pretty much, yeah.
Awesome. So we've gone over the new feature. From here, I want to kind of go into just the basics of what is Bacon, how do we do stuff in Bacon. As John was saying, like how do we do stuff to one machine, how do we do stuff to multiple machines. So let's kind of switch over from my beta environment back to demo, where I typically give my demos. And so what we're looking at here is the overview page, and I want to go over these widgets before we really get into the product. We'll just do like a quick view of each feature. There's always more stuff to learn. There's always specific use cases I'm sure people have questions about, and we're happy to meet and like do demos and kind of personalize things for you as well. So if you have any questions, please do fill out that survey. Let us know you want to be contacted, and we'll get in contact with you. So starting off here, we have alerts. So we have an agent installed on every machine. Just to kind of give you some background, Bacon can either be hosted by you or we can host it for you. And then every endpoint you're managing has a built-in agent that you'll install. And so here we're able to detect things like any kind of performance indicators that say high CPU utilization for 10 minutes. We can grab that. If services are offline or online, we can do that. If machines are up or down, we can do that, as well as various other things like tracking how old patches are, if you've got old software, things of that nature. Over in the endpoints counter, super simple. It's going to be which endpoints are online and offline. We've also recently added a warning indicator. So if there's any yellow machines in this list, that means we may not have good inventory data from them, or they're running into connection issues that our agent is reporting back. Over in distribution, as I said, we are cross-platform. So here are the platforms we have installed on demo. We're going to handle your standard forms of Windows, so both workstation and server, macOS, of course, various business forms of Linux. So right now we're looking at things that are either distros based on Red Hat or distros based on Debian. Those are all included. Of course, you can really never tell a Linux admin no, they'll install it anyway, but these are the ones we test against. Then we're on patches, how many patches or packages we have to update, again, split off by platform or OS in this case. Then next for antivirus protection, this is our feature able to track services on machines. I said services, so we can track as many as we need. And that allows you to have very flexible options here, especially if you're doing any acquisitions or trying new products. You can easily just add that service to the list and then we'll track it here. And lastly, another security focus, encrypted hard drives. So today we support BitLocker on the Windows side and FileVault on the Mac OS side, as well as we have some upcoming Lux encryption support for those Linux sides as well. So let's dive into, let's say, monitoring. So how this works is we create different rules, and then those rules will trigger alerts if whatever condition has been met. Here we see profiles. We'll kind of get into that lightly, but just keep in mind that with Bacon, you're able to both make configurations and also audit those configs, and the profile side of rules is part of that auditing. But again, we'll cover that shortly. So here we can make different rules, and these can be for things like we have too many patches available. Maybe we have a tolerance. In this case, it looks like 1. It's a bit extreme. I'd probably say like 10 or so. Or you can do it by patch age. All that kind of stuff is available here for you. So you can see the different monitors are able to push out. Now, once those rules are triggered, they'll generate an alert. We have direct integration over API with Jira and Autotask, so we can actually open and close tickets as well as we can email. So of course that supports all the other ticketing systems as well as like emailing your IT team and things like that. And so once they're triggered, they'll be here. We of course can easily dismiss them. Over on the outages side, if we're doing any kind of known maintenance or work, I don't like to have alerts generated that people are not supposed to act on. It's a terrible habit. So I use outages here to make sure that I'm silencing those alerts until the maintenance window has passed. And lastly, Knock Dashboard, which gives you a visual indicator of the health of your environment. A lot of our machines are in the red status because there's tons of patches available, so we can have that overview page look the way it does. This just kind of gives you an idea. One thing to note is with Bacon, the entire UI is very interactable, so you're able to click on any of these and go to those machines, and that's actually what we're going to jump into next. So here we're looking at an individual endpoint detail page, and this is going to show you all the data points we're pulling back. So as I go through these 8 different tiles, it's going to change the context of what we see below. So under system, it's pretty simple. On the right-hand side, we have tags that you can add. These can be used in search filters, as well as notes like this is someone's machine. Here's a serial number, or I guess we have that here, but you get the idea. The asset tag ID, let's say it that way, or any known issues or roles of the servers, you could do that. On the left-hand side here, we can see standard data points, so things like serial number, your RAM capacity versus utilization, CPU usage, all that kind of good stuff. As well as a live CPU and RAM indicator. I believe this updates every couple seconds. As we go through here, you're able to see more stuff. So we can see what drives you have. If you have any recovery keys, be it BitLock or file vault, excuse me, we're able to escrow those keys into Bacon. So you can pull those at your leisure whenever you need them versus relying on like any kind of AD integration or things like that. Over on network, of course, we can see what interfaces we have available. On the policy side, we can see what kind of profiles have been pushed to the machine. So like what kind of configs. You can kind of think about this like GPOs. It's a similar goal, although our methods are a bit different, but it's just pushing out configs to multiple devices. Over in groups, we can see if this device is a member of any static or dynamic groups. How that works is static groups are ones that you're going to assign as an admin. It stays that way until somebody modifies it. Dynamic groups actually use our filters we're going to look at in a moment here and allow you to have the system update your groups for you based on predefined criteria. Over on software, pretty self-explanatory. What kind of software are you running? Also have the option of uninstalling here, as well as we can see what other machines have that same software. And that kind of gives you more insight into what the software is if you're not aware. Maybe the entire marketing team downloaded something and you'll see like a 15 next to it. So you know it's not just one person. You might want to ask more questions. Over the available patches side, what patches do we have here to deploy? We'll cover how patching works in a moment with the larger patching menu that works for all machines. Then we have services. So like I said before, you can actually select these as antivirus, and that's going to do it machine or excuse me, product wide. So as long as the OS matches and the service name matches, we're able to detect it even though you selected it for one machine. And lastly, logs. So Bacon does a lot of stuff, and we like to log as much as possible to give you the maximum amount of insight, honestly. So if there's any problems, you can just go through and read the log. So here, this case looks like one of our profiles is like halfway deploying, but it's going to be able to figure out what's going on and give you all the updates as to what Bacon was able to do with it, or in this case, not able to do with it because these machines are offline. Lastly, on this page, I want to cover the remote controls. This is built into the agent. This allows us to remote over to machines quite simply. And so we have a screen remote. I think most of us have used remote tools. So the important thing to note here is this runs a system. And on my side, I don't need to have an additional client. And since they already have the agent, there's no additional work really needed. You just log into the web UI and you're good to go here. And we have different creature comforts. So like in the bottom left, we have, of course, all of your keyboard shortcuts. So Control Delete, Windows key L, that kind of stuff. In the bottom right, we have a user chat function. So let's say if Teams is broken or your chat app doesn't work, we can use this option instead to kind of work around it. And then, of course, we have various settings for things like if it's a left-handed computer, you can swap the mouse buttons. You can adjust your quality to lower the bandwidth you need and also display scaling and stuff like that as well. Next up, the shell remote, which is my personal favorite, allows you to access the console in the back end of the machine. And this runs a system by default, so it's super easy to do a lot of stuff because you already have the access to do so. The nice thing about this is it's a fully featured UI. It's actually rendered on the page, so you're able to copy and paste from it. and it's going to show any kind of like console, like text coloring, fonts, all that kind of good stuff, just like you would see if you were on the machine. But this is actually invisible to the user. So they're not going to get any kind of like pop-ups or bothers whenever you're doing this. So you can kind of log in, do some config changes, and move on to the next machine. Over on the file system side, again, very similar. It's hidden from the user, so you can just log in on the back end. And here we can upload and download files as well as just manipulate the file system. So we can make a folder, we can zip stuff up, all that kind of stuff. Rename folders if you want to as well. So tons of options there for you. If I return back to the initial endpoints table, this is the table of all the endpoints we have in Bacon and all their data. How this works is we have a search bar up top. This allows you to search through all the different data points. So if I type in Bacon admin here, it's technically searching through each column, but it's likely going to match on current user here. I also have the option of filters. Those allow me to filter my results here based on different criteria. So here I can make a filter for, let's say, status. Oops, that's how I spell it right. There we go. And I'll say everybody who's not disconnected. And then it changes the table I see here. I said dynamic groups earlier. This is how you actually build them. So we set these filters, and then they become part of a dynamic group, and then Bacon will auto update those group members based on the data we're getting back from the endpoints. So when I look at my East Coast Factory Network group here, it's just a simple IP address filter, but that's going to auto update as these machines join or leave this network. And so if I'm pushing out monitors or software packages, or maybe I gave somebody role-based access control to this group, that's going to save me a ton of time of trying to adjust stuff that may just be happening in the background. And then we can use those groups to deploy monitors, software, profiles, you name it. Groups are pretty integrated into all the functions of Bacon. So next up, let's actually take a look at patching. So under patching, we have a couple options here. Under available, this is going to be the patches we detect. How this works is we're scanning each machine to see what patches they have available, and then we're combining those into a table. This is cross-platform, but as John said, it looks like everybody has some kind of Windows device, so we're going to filter by that just so it's familiar for everybody. So here I can see different patches along with the metadata we're getting back. So in this case, we're pulling this from the system, and it's going to tell us exactly what the patch is, what the KB is, the version grid, any categories assigned, description, and if it does or does not require a reboot. Now, in these demos, I like to go through how patching works. I think it's super simple. And so what you're going to see here is I'll select a couple of machines, or a couple of patches in this case, for my machines. Go up to Actions and Install. Up here, I'm going to see the patches I picked, along with if they do or do not require reboot. And then down here, I have a set of endpoints that need this patch. Anything you see in this list is actually going to require this patch. We'll hide any machines that don't need it, so you don't have to worry about that. So I can pick a couple. The next up, I have scheduling. So I can push it out right away. That's going to install on everybody who's currently online. You can see this green indicator, but it's going to fail on these two, and it's not going to retry. What I like to do instead is use run when connected. This allows me to install it on everyone who's online now, and then I can have it queued in the system for these ones who are offline. I also have scheduled times. So maybe these are night shift workers. When it pushes out 6 p.m., I could do that and pick a date and time. Or I have relentless mode. John, I usually pass the mic over to you to explain this one, if you wouldn't mind this time as well.
Not a problem. Yeah, relentless mode is the feature that allows you to do more sort of time windows. A lot of people have to get approval to say, patch from noon until 4 p.m. on a Saturday or something like that. And the real big key there is that you can start all the tasks that you want to start, and you need to also finish those tasks in that time. And if you can't finish in that time, you need to stop. And so the way we've set up Bacon with relentless mode is sort of two parts. One is that window, and the fact that if you have 50 patches and those 50 patches require roughly 5 reboots, and that's completely just making that up because sometimes it's 1 reboot or no reboots, and sometimes it's 7 reboots. But the point is that you don't necessarily know that. So you can set this time window, you can run these patches, and the system will patch and reboot as many times as is necessary for those patches to get through the cycle, as long as you don't run out of time. So that's sort of the relentless part, is that we'll relentlessly patch even after reboots, picking up the job. And the idea there is that, if you're away for the weekend, you don't really feel like checking in on all of this while it's happening and rerunning jobs and things, you can just let this happen, and it will do all of the pieces within that time frame. And if you run out of time and maybe you only get to 35 or 40 of those patches and the associated reboots, at least you got to those. And the remaining 10 you can do on the next cycle, either next weekend or next month or whatever. So that's relentless mode, kind of in a nutshell. Hope that helps.
Yeah, that's perfect. Appreciate it.
You bet.
So then after you've done all your patching and push it out, we also have the patch history side of things. So we actually phased out compliance and rolled it into other features. I'm going to skip that for this one because for 5.0, you're not going to see this option. But how the history works is we're tracking the history of what patches were installed on every machine since you installed the agent. And we're going to keep that in our database so that you can tell which patches have actually been installed, which were superseded, all that kind of good stuff. So again, I'll filter this platform by Windows. And then we're going to see here all the different patches that were or were not installed. In this case, it's looking at available patches, so all these can be pushed out. We also have the date they were available, so you can kind of track how long it takes to properly patch your environment. If I add a filter in here for status, and I flip it to everything that's not available, we'll get the historical information. So when these patches were installed, or maybe they were advertised in the machine but then not installed. So we have history they could have been, but maybe they were superseded or just ignored or not done. You can see all that kind of stuff here. And of course, with most tables in Bacon, you're able to export these. So I can export this to an Excel spreadsheet and then go through this with like pivot tables, all kind of good stuff. And so that can be pretty relevant either for your own records or for auditing, right? Because we have proof of all these things either being installed or not installed. Next up, we're going to briefly cover software deployment in Bacon. So I'll start with managed packages. This is a service that we host that allows us to provide your server with the latest information on which packages have been updated and where to get those files. And so we'll host this service. Your machine or your server, excuse me, checks in, I think once a day by default. It can be more frequent. And you're able to go through here and get these things installed. As John said it earlier, we're able to automatically, or I think he said proactive third-party patching. This is kind of that proactive part. So how this works is we're using our profiles and states engine. It's essentially automation. And this lets you push out, let's say, the Brave browser, and then routinely check in to make sure that not only does your server have the proper version of the Brave browser to push out, but then all the machines are matching the version that we're pushing out as well. This is all automatic. All you have to do is go through, find your app of choice, and you go to Actions and Manage. And then once it downloads, you can do Create State, and that's going to let you push it out to your machines. Now, if your software is not in this list, you have a couple options. We can either make our own local package, which we'll probably cover that in another webinar, or we can actually upload these to Bacon's file repo and push those out. So here you can see all the individual files we've uploaded. These can be things like scripts, font files, really anything under the sun. And we can either execute these or just place them in a folder. So let's say I wanted to push this setup exe, probably Office. We're going to just use it as a demo. So I'll go to deploy here. I'm going to choose Windows since it's an executable. And then I want to choose Launcher here so I can actually push it out. Then I'll see all the Windows endpoints in here. And then installation location is where it's going to drop this file. So let's say if I was dropping font files, I could actually enter a location here and it'll just place the file there for me. In this case, the temp Bacon folder is fine. Any kind of folders that don't exist, the system will make those for you. Then you can choose your run as. So on Windows, we have to do a username and password. For the other operating systems, excuse me, we don't need to actually supply anything other than the username. Then lastly, we have executable flags. So this is where we would add all of our like silent installs and stuff like that to get this installed. And lastly, our deployment time. It's going to look very similar to patching. We're just missing the relentless mode option. So again, same deploy right away, run when connected, which will queue it for everyone who's offline, and then at a certain time. Now, if we have more complicated things or maybe we're running like multi-part scripts, then bundles is really going to come in for you. So bundles are essentially just a collection of files that are pushed all together, and then we're going to execute one of them. So in the Office install option, you could theoretically just remember all of the different params, give it to everyone on like a spreadsheet or a notepad, and then have them copy and paste it every time. But it's going to make a lot more sense to probably make a script to do it for you and then push the files across. So from your help desk perspective, you can have them deploy bundles while the admin's uploading individual scripts and kind of building these out for everyone. So here we're actually pushing 3 files at once and we're launching this PowerShell script. When the script just calls the exes that we've dropped in the folder and then gives us some output which Bacon will pick up and put into the logs per machine. So pretty seamless option here. And again, just like before you're able to deploy these bundles, it's the same exact process. You'll go through here, click deploy. We already know the platform and stuff since that's part of creating a bundle. So now you just pick your machines and you're good to go. Now, again, very high level stuff, but I want to kind of give you guys an idea of what's possible. Lastly, we'll kind of end on this one, profiles and states. So Bacon is able to enforce configurations and audit those configs. This is excellent for any kind of security or critical configurations because of how our agent works. We're having a one-to-one connection with every machine, and then we're auditing to make sure that they're actually following the policies we've set. So here you can see things, I know in one webinar I made a baseline security profile. So I had individual configurations here, these states, and that can be things like disabling a service, or possibly setting registry keys. And then you combine those into a profile, which is like a container, and then that profile can run on a frequency, let's say every day, every week, every 30 minutes, every hour. And with that, you're able to push these out to your machines. And then Bacon's going to reply back in our logs and let you know if anybody was deviating from that configuration and how we were able to fix it. Now, as I mentioned in the very start of the webinar, the monitoring function does tie in with profiles. You can actually set up profiles to alert you whenever people are not, or machines, I should say, are not found to be in compliance. That can be very useful on the security side. If you're disabling services and they are all of a sudden enabled for a critical machine, you want to look into it. One very basic one is we're, I don't know, setting up a kiosk, and then for some reason it starts to drift. Maybe someone's messing with it, maybe it's Windows updates, that kind of thing. So that's kind of like a very high level overview of the features we have in Bacon. John, as I kind of go through here, anything you think I missed or anything we want to highlight before we close this out?
I think probably we'll just quickly talk about the fact that there's a lot more stuff coming, and
Mm-hmm.
that we have, we're really honing in on sort of the ultimate patching experience. We've gotten a tremendous amount of feedback over the last 6 months, and a lot of those things are coming to fruition right now. So one of the things we'll be showing next month will be the new user service, which essentially, think of that little pop-up you get when you need a reboot from patches in Windows, but imagine it for both Windows and Mac, and imagine it being much more robust with a lot of control. And so we'll be showing off things like deadline jobs, where the end user essentially has the ability to get a nice notification. It tells them what patches are going to be installed, that what the deadline is that you get to set. It's going to have your logo on it, and you're going to be able to give them the option to temporarily defer and to schedule it and to really make sure those things are getting done so you can meet your security objectives. So kind of a lot of things are getting tied together right now in a really perfect workflow. We're also going to be adding that deadline capability to third-party software upgrades. So a great example came up, and we really loved this example from a potential customer, which was, when they upgrade Zoom, they have to reboot it, and that could happen in the middle of the day when someone's in the middle of a Zoom call. So that could be pretty terrible. So we're going to add that same deadline capability so that end users have the ability to do that at their leisure within that deadline time frame. And it just allows you to get a lot of things off your plate, but with some guaranteed results. So that's coming, and also some really cool new advanced recurring scheduling of jobs, including patch approvals and auto approvals, and just some things that take what we all wished automatic updates would be, but more into the full control that we want over those kinds of things, so that for some patches or lines of patches, we can get those done without a lot of extra labor. So really looking forward to talking about that next month on our next webinar, and just a lot of other little subtle things and going to be talked about. So I think that's it, Dave. Unless you've got anything else to add, I think we'll just remind everybody to please fill out the survey. We really need that. Someone told me that my mic didn't sound too good, so I've definitely got to get something figured out there. But other than that, we thank you all very much for your time, and we will see you next time.